In this edition of Been There, Done That, Shouldn't Have, I want to do in an economist. Ooh, I think I hear cheering already. As Walter Bagehot once said, no real Englishman in his secret soul was ever sorry for the death of a political economist. They're more likely to be sorry for his life. And that's especially true in this case, because the individual I want to finish off is John Maynard Keynes, the father of deficit financing and willful short-sightedness in public policy. Now, I promised not to overload you with mathematics in this series, so I'm not going to get into liquidity preference or any of the other jiggery pokery in Keynes' monumental general theory of employment, interest, and money. It's impenetrable even by the standards of economics. As a matter of fact, Keynes once had a meeting with FDR, whose interventionist policies he generally supported, and it went quite badly. The baffled President Roosevelt commented afterward to his Secretary of Labor, "That fellow must have been a mathematician or something," whereas Keynes sneered, "I'd always supposed the president was more literate, economically speaking." But in a weird way, the impenetrability of Keynes was part of the secret of his success. It gave him this aura of profound wisdom. Supporters couldn't see what was wrong with the argument, so they just went ahead with it because it seemed to legitimize what their gut was telling them to do anyway. And critics, even if they could unravel Keynes' argument, couldn't get through to the public with the refutation because the public didn't know what Keynes had said. So the net effect of it was to convince everybody that some guy as brilliant as Albert Einstein and as hard to follow had said that if you spent money you didn't have, you'd get it by some kind of arcane mathematical magic, and that governments did have free lunches and really, really ought to hand them out. In Keynes, there is also, I think, a terrible air of frivolity for all the mathematical seriousness of it. One of his most acute critics, that's Friedrich Hayek, had taken a lot of time and trouble to refute an earlier Keynesian tract on monetary policy, only to run into Keynes one day and have Keynes breezily say, "Oh, never mind, I no longer believe all that." The fact that it might have influenced government policy didn't seem to be a big issue. So when the general theory came out, Hayek thought, why would I waste my time trying to argue against something Keynes will soon repudiate? But Keynes didn't repudiate it, at least not soon enough, and it had an amazing effect on down to the present day. Even conservative politicians, who you'd think would believe in free markets and balanced budgets, react to bad times by deficit spending to stimulate the economy. It's astounding, as Keynes himself said. Even people who think they're very practical are actually channeling some academic scribbler from years back. And increasingly in the modern world, it's Keynes. Now, I said Keynes was frivolous. Here's, I think, an even more telling example of that. In a book he wrote in the 1920s, he commented on the argument in orthodox economics that markets and incentives would sort problems out in the long run, and Keynes said, well, in the long run, we're all dead. This is shocking lack of interest in posterity and also in truthfulness. Keynes was quite scornful of the notion of absolute truth. All he wanted was to find something that would currently influence policy in whatever direction he currently thought it should go. And if he changed his mind, why, he would just change it back. As a matter of fact, at the very end of his life, Keynes did get worried that people had taken the general theory too much to heart, and he was giving speeches and writing articles saying we need to get back to Adam Smith. But before he could change the public's mind back like the magician he was, he succumbed to a chronic heart condition. He died in 1946 at age 62, before he could change people's minds. The result of it is that any good he did was interred with his bones, but we're stuck with the bad effects of his policy. Because, as another great critic of Keynes, Henry Hazlitt, said, today is already the tomorrow that the bad economists told us to ignore yesterday. However, there is no need for tomorrow also to be that tomorrow. Keynesianism doesn't work. Once you start deficit spending, you keep deficit spending, debt piles up, the economy doesn't recover. We know, we've been there, we've done that, and we shouldn't have. So it is time to bury the general theory of employment, interest, and money alongside its author.